There was a time when defending in football was incredibly simple. A defender stood between the attacker and the goal, waited for the right moment, and made the tackle. The entire job could be summed up in one sentence: stop the man with the ball. If you did that successfully, you were considered a great defender. But football never stays the same. As the game evolved, defending transformed from a basic individual battle into one of the most complex parts of modern football. Today, defenders are expected to do far more than tackle. They organize entire defensive structures, control space, coordinate with teammates, manipulate opponents, and sometimes begin attacks before they even start. Modern defending often takes place 50 meters away from goal. Defenders no longer wait for danger to arrive, they actively hunt it down. To understand how we got here, it helps to look at the defensive ideas that changed the game forever. One of the earliest and most influential concepts was man-marking. For decades, this was football's default defensive system. Every defender was assigned a specific opponent and told to follow him wherever he went. If the striker drifted wide, the defender followed. If he dropped into midfield, the defender followed. There were no complicated positional responsibilities and very little emphasis on controlling space. Everything revolved around personal accountability. The philosophy was straightforward. If your assigned attacker couldn't receive the ball, he couldn't hurt your team. For a long time, this approach worked extremely well. Defenders became specialists at tracking movements, anticipating runs, and staying physically connected to their opponents. The legendary defensive systems associated with Italian football built much of their success on these principles. However, football became increasingly fluid. Attackers started swapping positions, making decoy runs, and dragging defenders away from dangerous areas. Clever teams discovered that they didn't need to beat a defender directly. Sometimes they only needed to lure him somewhere he shouldn't be. As a result, man-marking began to reveal weaknesses that hadn't existed before. Yet its influence never disappeared. Even today, many defenders still rely on man-marking principles in certain situations. The concept taught football an important lesson. Great defending begins with awareness. Knowing where your opponent is at all times already gives you a significant advantage. As attacking systems became more sophisticated, coaches started searching for a different solution. Instead of focusing on individual opponents, they began focusing on space. This led to the rise of zonal marking. Rather than assigning defenders to specific attackers, teams assigned them to specific areas of the pitch. A defender's responsibility was no longer to follow a player everywhere. Instead, he protected his zone. If an attacker entered that area, he engaged. If the attacker moved elsewhere, the defender remained in position and trusted a teammate to take over. At first, this idea seemed risky. Many defenders felt uncomfortable allowing opponents to move freely without following them. Coaches worried that attackers would exploit the apparent freedom. But as possession-based football became more common, zonal marking proved its value. Teams maintained better defensive shape, reduced gaps between players, and prevented opponents from pulling defenders out of position. Rather than creating a collection of individual battles, zonal marking created a coordinated defensive unit. The philosophy behind it was revolutionary. Instead of defending people, teams defended space. This shift changed football forever because it transformed defending into a collective responsibility. Success no longer depended solely on one defender winning his duel. It depended on 11 players maintaining structure together. As defensive organization improved, teams discovered another powerful weapon: the offside trap. For many years, defenders preferred caution. They stayed deep because they feared being beaten by pace. The offside rule existed, but it was mostly a reactive part of the game rather than something teams actively used. That mindset eventually changed. Coaches realized that a defensive line moving forward together could force attackers into illegal positions. Instead of retreating from danger, defenders could create danger for the opposition. The offside trap relies entirely on coordination. Every player in the defensive line must move as one. If even a single defender hesitates, the entire trap collapses. But when executed perfectly, it can completely neutralize attacking threats before they even receive the ball. This is what makes the offside trap so fascinating. It turns defense into an act of aggression. Rather than simply reacting to attacks, defenders dictate what attackers are allowed to do. The striker may believe he has found space behind the defense, only to discover that he has been caught offside. It is one of football's clearest examples of intelligence and timing defeating raw speed. Then came perhaps the biggest defensive revolution of the modern era. For generations, teams responded to losing possession by retreating. The instinct was simple: get behind the ball, regroup, and protect the goal. Defending began only after the opposition had already established possession. Modern football challenged that assumption completely. Instead of falling back, elite teams started attacking immediately after losing the ball. The moment possession changed hands became the most important defensive moment in the game. This idea became known as the high press, often associated with gegenpressing. Under managers like Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, teams learned that winning the ball close to the opponent's goal could be more valuable than defending deep near their own penalty area. Players pressed aggressively, cut off passing lanes, and swarmed opponents before they had time to organize an attack. The result was extraordinary. Teams recovered possession faster, prevented dangerous counterattacks, and created scoring opportunities almost instantly. The high press blurred the line between attack and defense. In many ways, it eliminated the distinction altogether. Winning the ball became the first step of attacking, while losing it triggered an immediate defensive response. The philosophy was simple but powerful. The best defense may actually be a form of offense. Of course, not every defensive situation can be solved through positioning or pressing. Sometimes football presents moments where a split-second decision matters more than any tactical system. This is where the tactical foul enters the conversation. Traditionally, fouling was viewed negatively. Coaches encouraged players to win the ball fairly, and deliberate fouls were often criticized as signs of poor defending. But modern football introduced a different perspective. As transitions became faster and counterattacks became more dangerous, players recognized that allowing an opponent to continue running toward goal could be far more costly than accepting a yellow card. In certain situations, stopping play immediately became the smartest option available. The tactical foul emerged as a calculated sacrifice. A defender might pull a shirt, block a run, or commit a minor infringement in midfield, not out of frustration, but as a deliberate strategic decision. The goal is not to hurt the opponent. The goal is to stop momentum, allow teammates to recover their positions, and prevent a dangerous situation from developing. This approach demonstrated another important truth about football. Success is often determined by decision-making rather than physical ability alone. The smartest defenders are not always the strongest or fastest. Sometimes they are simply the players who recognize the correct choice before anyone else does. When you look at all of these defensive ideas together, a clear pattern emerges. Football's greatest defensive innovations were never really about tackling. They were about understanding the game more deeply than the opponent. Man marking emphasized awareness. Zonal marking emphasized structure. The offside trap emphasized timing. The high press emphasized initiative. The tactical foul emphasized decision-making. Each philosophy solved a different problem. Each emerged because the game evolved and demanded new answers. And that is why defending today looks so different from defending 50 years ago. Modern defenders don't simply protect the goal. They control space, manipulate movement, coordinate teammates, and influence entire matches. They hunt rather than wait. They organize rather than react. They think several passes ahead. In the end, defending is no longer just about stopping an attack. It is about controlling what the attack is allowed to become. Master that skill, and defending becomes one of the most powerful weapons in football.